Solving absolute value equations, problem type 1. Okay, the basics of an absolute value equation is that's the symbol for the absolute value. So it's basically asking you what values are the distance away from 0, and that could change depending on the question, with a distance of 3. So the middle here is 0. Like I said, it's not always 0. So the distance of 3 away and the distance of 3 away, that gives us -3 and +3. So those would be our two answers here. And the absolute value of -3 is +3. The absolute value of 3 is 3. Okay, so that's kind of the behind the scenes of what goes on with an absolute value equation. Now, putting numbers in here is going to change this. This is called the center, and there's a few little tricks in here. So let's take a look at our first problem. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, the absolute value of x minus 18 equals -10. Okay, so Alex will tell you is if there's more than one solution, separate them with commas. If there's no solution, you'll have a box that you can, or a circle that you can click that says no solution. So the absolute value of x minus 18 equals -10. So a couple steps. For the basic problems, the steps aren't as important, but this first one definitely is. Isolate the absolute value. Okay, whatever's inside of there. Isolate that absolute value. So you have to get it all alone. So what would we do? How do we get rid of this minus 18? We would add 18. So we're going to add 18 to both sides. So the absolute value of x equals -10 plus 18 is 8. And now for this problem, it's not that important, but it helps later on. I write this as 2 equations. So I say whenever we do an absolute value, we write 2 equations. Now for this one, could you just look at it and answer it? Of course you can. But what you're really doing is you're going to take x equals 8, and then x equals the opposite, so -8. And because there's no solving here, those are the 2 answers. So in Alex, you would type -8, -8. Okay. Now you might be questioning, why is there a no solution? Why is that an option? Well, once you isolate an absolute value, if you get the absolute value of whatever's in here, it could be x, it could be x plus 2, you'll see more as we move on. If that equals a negative number, automatically we know it's no solution. But you can't make that call until you isolate the absolute value. So for example, let's say the absolute value of x plus 6 equals 2. Well, right now that looks good, but you have to isolate the absolute value. So to isolate the absolute value, what would you do? You would subtract 6 from both sides. Absolute value of x equals -4. Okay, that's no good, so this is a no solution. The distance from 0 can't be negative. How about this one? -6 absolute value of x equals -18. At first, that does not look good, but we have to isolate this x first. So this is multiplication here. How do you undo multiplication? You divide. So we're going to divide by -6, divide by -6, and we're going to get the absolute value of x equals 3. Now that's good. So we get x equals 3 and -3. That one works. So at first it didn't look like it, but once we isolated that absolute value, it did turn into something that worked. Let's take a look at another. Now that's very similar to what we just did. So divide by 6, you get 3. And here is another one here. So this one here, if you divide both sides by -2, you get the absolute value of v equals -8, and that's a no solution. So this problem right here would be no solution because you get the absolute value of v equals -8 because you divide 16 by -2. Okay. That concludes our solving absolute value equations, problem type 1.